Okay, here we go. We're recording. Cool. Well, welcome. For everyone who doesn't know, this is Villain with the Villain Report. You have been doing some really incredible work this past year, and I want to get into it a little bit. First of all, how did you start out? Because, for people that don't know who you are, you go in, you cover civil, unrest, riots, protests, and a whole bunch of other political things, current events, things of that nature. So, how did you start out doing that, first and foremost?
Well, at the end of May, when the George Floyd incident happened in Minneapolis, I was kind of disturbed by that. And I started seeing potential for that to go all over the country. I was in Portland at the time. Then I think it was the 28th or the 29th, they had their first big riot in Portland. And a couple days before that, I had went out and seen some political speeches having to do with the George Floyd incident. I saw Joanne Hardesty speak in front of the Justice Center, and I felt that her rhetoric was going to incite violence, and turned out a day or two later, they had a giant riot in Portland. I went out in black bloc that night. Never done that before. I just kind of wanted to see for myself what was going to happen if they were literally going to burn the city down. Because I think if you remember at that time, the footage coming out of Minneapolis, I mean, it was bad there, but they made it look like the whole city was just getting pure anarchy and destroyed. So I put black bloc on. I wasn't really trying to deceive anybody or trick anybody. I wanted to be able to walk around and look at things and see it for myself without drawing attention to myself. And I took my phone out and recorded some things, not streaming or anything, because I was just kind of blown away by what was happening there that night. And I think I put a little bit of that out on Facebook or Twitter at the time. And then over the next couple of days, I kept doing that. I kept going out and just filming that. I was just shocked that it was continuing. And then what really blew me away was the difference between what I was seeing on the media as far as how they were reporting on Portland and what I saw firsthand. They did not match at all. Then I started hearing about CHOP, paying attention to that a little bit more. And I went up to Seattle, and I just spent a couple days there and saw it for my own eyes, because I wanted to see the things that the media was saying were pretty extreme. They were saying Raz was a warlord there, and people were being frisked and patted down and ID'd with guards that were holding AKs. CHOP was crazy. It was weird, but it was not the cartoon place that the media was making it out to be. And then for the next couple weeks, I just kind of interviewed a lot of people at the riots in Portland and the marches and all that kind of stuff. And then I went back to CHOP when they were supposedly going to have the city come and shut down the area that morning on, I don't know, was that June 28th, I
I
think?
believe it was in June. Yeah, late June.
Yeah. So I had been just, excuse me, filming, just recording and then uploading videos to different platforms. I hadn't started live streaming yet, but that night, that morning, the city ended up not coming in. They didn't shut it down like they said they were going to. And then I stayed around and filmed a couple things there that happened. They were costing some mainstream media people pretty hard. And then that's when the shooting event happened that night. And I recorded that. And from there, I just started kind of making it somewhat of a full-time job for myself, and just started live streaming the riots in Portland. I'll get back to you, so I keep
Yeah,
going forever.
I think that, that's how I originally found your footage and your work was when you're, it was an interview you were doing with a transgender woman. And when those shots started to fire off, and the way that you went about covering and collecting that footage, it was so well-rounded, and it really gave the viewer or the person tuning in this you know, a full spectrum of the scene that you were walking into. You know, I think that's one thing that you're very talented at, very skilled at, is, you know, you'll walk the blocks. You'll say, okay, this is how this is affecting this block right here. Here's this block. You can see these windows are boarded up, you know, and that's kind of, it was a very thorough approach. And when those shots were being fired off, you know, it really brought you into that space. And I remember seeing your YouTube channel, and at that point you only had like 300 followers or something. I was like, this guy is so professional, like where's his followers at, you know? And slowly but surely you've built your platform, and it's been a really incredible journey. I think you've had a lot of support and good feedback throughout the year. So let's go into Chop and Chaz a little bit. What was your feeling being on the ground? Because you actually, and talk a little bit about Raz Simone, because people don't really, you know, a lot of people aren't familiar with that person. So let's talk about who's Raz and how did you interact with him? Give us a little bit of a background on that whole experience that night specifically.
So most of what I know about Raz is just by anybody else looking online and finding information on him. That night when the shooting happened and I came up on the scene of the two boys laying on the ground and realized that nobody was really taking charge to actually get these boys helped into the hospital. They were just, nobody knew what to do. And I think people were kind of arrogantly pretending they had more medical skills than they did. So I started organizing a couple cars to drive up in the area, and I started shouting to people to get the bodies, so the people into the cars now, stop trying to play doctor here on the ground. And so I ended up helping to carry the young 14-year-old boy into the back seat of this white car. And the way it worked out unintentionally, I ended up being in the car and driving, riding the boy to the hospital with them, because I kind of had to get into the back seat to help pull his body into the car. And then the car was parked in a way that the door on the other side was shut, and it couldn't open. There was stuff on there. So it was like, oh, I guess I'm coming. And I held him in my lap on the way to the hospital. And then I did not know until quite a while later, the police asked us to stay around at the hospital for several hours. They kept delaying to talk to us. And the media showed up, the mainstream media, and they were asking for interviews. And I told them, no way, I don't like you guys. That's why I'm up here looking at this stuff on myself. I don't trust you guys. But the driver of the car, I did not know was Raz. I did not know that until he agreed to give one of the media people an interview, and she asked him his name. He said Raz, and I was like, what? And I hadn't even realized that he was the one driving the car. But
Wow.
that's, yeah.
So in regards to those two boys, for people that don't know, they're runaways, correct?
Yeah.
They're runaways. Were they driving a stolen vehicle, or?
Yeah, from everything I gather, they weren't brothers. They were like, call each other the Street Brothers, I guess. They lived in a tent with another woman and a man, homeless in the Cal Anderson Park. That's the park in Chop. So I think a lot of people don't realize is that, from what I've gathered, there's a couple different demographics in that neighborhood of Capitol Hill. One, as far as I understand, it's a gang territory. It's kind of a Crip area. And then another is it's the LGBT neighborhood. So there's different demographics there, but it's always that park has always been kind of a dangerous place. There's a lot of shootings and stuff there. I believe the week and a half before, when that 19-year-old boy was shot and killed, I also believe that was gang related as well. But from everything I understand, those boys were trying to get street cred to get into a gang. So they went out and stole a car that night, and they were trying to drive into the barriers of Chop so they could avoid police catching them. They were trying to get like anarchy sanctuary, I guess. At that time, nobody really knew what was happening. There was people driving around. I'm not even sure if it was just one vehicle or multiple vehicles, but people were talking about SUVs. The more people I talked to, everybody started saying a white SUV. And so There's one video you can find online. I think it might have been from Diaz Love. She shows the white Jeep driving through the ball field. What that was is they were trying to get into CHOP, and there were concrete barriers all around the autonomous zone, and they couldn't find the one place where they could drive in. So they drove up the steps onto the ball field trying to get in there, but the other side of the ball field was also outside. So people see the car driving through the ball field while there's shots going around everywhere, and everybody thinks that there's a white Jeep or a white SUV type vehicle. And they assumed that those boys were the ones shooting. As far as I know, they had no guns. There were no signs of shooting from inside the vehicle, only outside into the vehicle. So I think those boys were not involved in the shooting, but were mistaken. They came in driving into CHOP pretty fast on, I think it's 12th Street there, where the final shooting happened. And I think they were panicking, trying to get into the anarchy zone so the cops wouldn't get them. And then all the anarchists there were scared that we thought an active shooter situation was happening. And so the boys drove into the area pretty fast, and they unloaded on them, shot them.
And that was pretty much the end of CHOP, right? Like after that situation happened, it kind of just all went away. Like people, did they shut down the area? And, you know, I mean, you can give us your final thoughts on the situation, but at the end of the day, I think it's really incredible that this whole movement started with the death of a Black man, right? George Floyd. And then Chop and Chaz kind of ended in the same way. Like 2 Black boys were killed in a very gruesome and terrible way. Like, did it end shortly after that? I mean,
yes, the Seattle Police Department took my footage and a couple of streamers' footage, Amari, Shanghai, I believe maybe 1 or 2 other sets of footage, and they splice it all together and put it on their own websites, their YouTube and their different social media platforms. And they kind of used that video to pressure the mayor to act against CHOP. And I think it was like 2 days later, that's when the hundreds of police officers came in and just swept the area, got rid of all the tents, and just shut the whole thing down by force.
interesting. Yeah, that was a very wild ride to be reporting on. I was reporting on it, you know, from a distance, but it was really difficult watching that whole thing kind of unravel. You know, this entire movement, I feel like a lot of people have good intentions, right? Just kind of how Chop and Chaz started. Like when it first started, you saw the artists, you saw people talking about community gardens, having self-sustainability, like all these really progressive, positive concepts, right? But then it's like you get human nature, you get real life, and these types of terrible situations come out of it, right? So as of now, like where do you see this movement? Is it still a positive and progressive, and or has it turned into something else?
I have never seen the movement in that light. When I was at CHOP, I was blown away by how many different factions there were fighting with each other, just constantly. How much violence was there. You can say like, oh, we're gonna do these community gardens, but that community garden area was one of the most dangerous places in CHOP at night, where those tents were around there. You'd constantly hear assaults and fighting, and something sounded like women were getting sexually assaulted. There was a lot of very, very bad things happening there regularly. So I never saw that. There was a lot of people with bleeding hearts and think they're going to change the world, but it just didn't make sense. Like the people running the what I called the commissaries, the little grocery stores, which I volunteered at for a little bit. They seemed disconnected with reality, because all of the stuff being provided to the grocery stores were just hundreds and hundreds of people just donating supplies and food and that. And I remember one guy's, I can't remember exactly what he said. He's like, great, this is perfect. This is how it's going to be from now on. And so he didn't have this, I he thought that that was just going to go on forever, that people were just going to keep giving them everything they needed to live, and nobody was going to have to actually work to provide those resources. So, but I have not had Black Lives Matter, the Antifa crowd, the communist crowd, the hippie crowd that was at CHOP. Maybe some of those people have bleeding hearts and motives of altruism on the surface, but I didn't buy it. From all of what I've seen in the last couple of months, the common thread that I have experienced was a hatred of any kind of authority, and for them to want to be the authority. That's why CHOP broke down so bad, and that's why anarchy does not work, because it creates a power vacuum, and usually the powers that be are replaced by worse powers than were there in the first place. But yeah, I've never had I've never seen those movements in good light.
So, I have to ask you like a personal question. You wear the mask, you wear black bloc. What is your, what made you decide to present yourself in that way? Was there something that really just stood out, like, I need to protect my identity? Or did you get personal threats? Like, what was the decision behind that?
When as I said, I first started doing it just to fit in, just to go unnoticed, so that I could see things for myself. And then after the shooting, Seattle homicide detectives told me that I was probably not in the most safe position, and that they told me to stay out of Seattle for a while, not as a rule, but for my safety. And there were some of the other streamers that were known were getting serious death threats. And so that's when I kind of just locked everything down and went full anonymous.
Interesting. Yeah. So in regards to Antifa, who do you think is the ringleader of all of this? Like, if you can, I mean, because they say like there's no leaders, I have my own opinions. Like, for example, the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, like he dresses in all black. He talks about Black Lives Matter, and he lets Antifa pretty much run wild on Twitter, right? Like they don't get banned, they don't get censored, those group, like, do you think that these, like, there's certain elites that are high level that are kind of either like fueling this or supporting it? Or is it just on the ground, no leaders, just anarchists getting together and, burning things down? What do you think's behind all this?
As far as like the ultimate like leadership and the source of leadership, I really don't know to that. I do know that it's both a mindset, and it's both an organization, because anybody that's been at any of these events will see that there's a clear organization. People have radios, people are there's graphic artists making flyers, there's a network of an alert network to tell them to flash mob certain places where hundreds of people will show up within an hour. There is organization there, but I think it's a lot of it. I'd say the cloud around the center that's organized is just people that are basically they believe in Marxist ideas or utopian ideas, and they really think that we're going to be able to end rent or create universal basic income. And if we just have these policies and we oust the political powers that be, that things will just naturally get better. I think they, like you talked about the human condition and what happens when things actually start playing out. I think a lot of people think the opposite, and they think that if we just take away restraints, that naturally the goodness of the human heart will create a better system. But as far as I know there are people in power that definitely are for this and donate lots of money and help the situation. a couple times I've had serious threats on Twitter, and when I reported those to try to get them removed, Twitter has several times tried to get me to give them a scan of my state driver's license. I flat out told them no, I'm not going to do that. But there's a threat against my life on your platform. You need to remove that. And then they would remove it and not ask me for the ID again. But that's happened several times. I thought that was quite suspicious.
What do you think? I mean, where do you see this all going? Like, where do you see this country in, say, 5 years?
Man. For one, I don't know. I'm a yokel, uneducated on these topics deeply. I do have a lot of my own knowledge that I've self-educated myself on things, but I'm no expert in any means. I'm the average American, the average person. But I think I'm kind of I'm not optimistic about America. I see patterns in history that are at the collapse of every great civilization that mirror what is going on in America and generally the West today. That are it just seems so obvious to me that the civilization is at the brink of collapse. And while I hope that doesn't happen, I've the more I see that Americans they're apathetic and nobody's showing up to events where there's peaceful events to protest, to speak out against the violent protesters or the bad things and the power grabs that the government's making. I don't know. Everybody keeps asking, everybody in these circles asks me that, and I ask them that, and we all are just like, I don't know. It's so hard to predict. Every time we think the riots are dying down, just the other day, the anarchists in Portland, Oregon hit a residential neighborhood. It's not completely a residential neighborhood, but it's not downtown. They hit the Hollywood neighborhood and attacked like 30 businesses, and it just seemed like that was maybe behind us possibly, but every time it dips down, it pops back up again. So I really don't know. I don't know. I could see there's so many new things in the world, like our information and the power as far as energy and like gasoline and electricity that we have today that's new, the internet. And I think that maybe we're at like some things grow in quantum stages, a step. And I think civilization has come to this wall where it just can't get up onto the next step. So I kind of think that it's possible that something great could happen and civilization jumps up to that next quantum step of growth. I also think, and I'm pessimistic, that civilization is pretty near on the verge of collapsing again.
Sure. Have you ever heard that the social media algorithms, because they create such a extreme polarization, Facebook actually caused a genocide to happen in a specific country. I don't remember which one off the top of my mind, but due to the fact that, for example, like the people on the left were getting only one source of information, and then the people on the right, as we see here, were getting only one specific source of information, because the algorithms were so specific that it created such a breakdown between these two different groups that it actually created a genocide. And I'm just wondering, with the rhetoric that's going on, a lot of people are talking about civil war. You could argue that we're already kind of seeing that in a sense. But do you think that there's a potential for us to see genocide in our lifetime in America?
Yes, definitely. That's really scary.
Who do
Yeah,
you think would
I'm
be
worried.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm honestly worried, and this will make me sound like a right-wing nut. I honestly think we're seeing an active Marxist revolution in the streets right now, and I see the same patterns that have happened in other communist revolutions, and I, we're seeing people on the left and sometimes on the right. I see it more on the left, where they're making lists of people that have donated to conservative platforms or voted for conservative candidates, and they're outright threatening them, like, when we get into power, we're going to hold you guys accountable for this. And that's some scary rhetoric,
Absolutely.
because we can act like that's not going to happen today. It's hard to believe, but it's happened over and over and over. And they start, countries have very often rounded up political dissidents and executed them. I hope not.
Absolutely.
I hope I'm seeing things in extremes, and that's not true. But I don't think it's an unreasonable fear, and I think many Americans are having that same fear in them. Gun sales and ammo sales have been insane this last year. It's people can hardly find certain ammo in the stores because it's all being bought. Very tense energy right now.
Yeah, definitely. So who do you think, who do you think would be the victim group if we saw all of this come to play? Who would be the victims? Who would be the people, wielding the force and the power? Um, who do you see engaging in that kind of behavior?
Well, right now, the people that are openly talking about encouraging that sort of thing are usually radical leftists, or even a lot of times just middle of the road leftists. But the last few months, I've seen the right starting to have a swing back, and I often question if the left is truly, if one view is actually truly good or better than the other view, and one view of the world is actually deceived, or if you just see time to time the two different mindsets showing their better or worse natures. But I do fear the right swinging back too far. That's what happened in Germany. That's Antifa was originally from the 1930s Germany. They were basically the German militant communist party, and they started doing the same things that Antifa is doing today, and using the rhetoric to um, make things look one way when it's not actually that true, and trying to instigate things. And then you got the Nazis, was the hard extreme swingback. And I know there's a lot of other things that were going on in the world at that time, and it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in regards to your work, what does the future look like for you? Are you going to continue, doing journalism? Are you going to continue going out to these events? What are your plans? And I mean, are you going to eventually try to leave America? Are you going to stick around? What's your game plan?
I don't know if we lose America, where would you go? Like, where else do we have to go? That's the last place of freedom. I'm gonna continue doing this stuff. I'm gonna start doing more of like interviews and podcasts on my channels, and I kind of have been trying to define what it is that I do the last couple months, because while there is an aspect of journalism that I'm doing where I'm showing things, and I try to show an unbiased, but I also have my opinions, and I don't hide those. I share my opinions freely, and um, but I'm also, some of my platform is kind of like the style of an influencer, and I'm trying to decide like how I am true to both of those things without corrupting one or the other, and still trying to figure that out. But I kind of want to. Before this all ever happened, my dream was to have an influencing platform on social media, basically be a YouTuber, so that I could discuss philosophy and try to influence the world to be better, and help those around me to understand things better. And I think one of my routes I'm going to go on that is just kind of share my learning process as I more formally study things like philosophy and politics, and just share my thoughts on it and let people go down that route with me. One thing I'd like to really check and see if I know the things that I know, or if I'm just extremely biased. I'd like to go through some books. Like I'm deciding if I want to jump into the first one, but I want to go through the 3 volumes of Capital and see if I really just think that I'm against communism, or if I really know what I think I know about it. So just to share the journey of learning with people, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, when you come off, whether it's in your interview or a live stream, you're a very thoughtful person. That comes off just automatically, and I think that that's what's so refreshing for people and for your viewers is, it's not just these quick little, bits of, oh, here's this crazy thing that's happening. Look at this, move on, move on, move on. It's like, no, let's think about this. Let's talk about it. And you talk to all sides of the spectrum. You're so willing to have conversations, whether it's a Republican or an Antifa person, if they talk to you, or an anarchist or whatever. It's like you're willing and wanting to have those conversations. And I think that that's such an important element right now, is bridging these sides and allowing people to understand, here's what this person feels and here's how this person thinks, and like bringing together, at the end of the day, the reason why I brought up genocide is I've actually been looking into it a lot, like what causes a genocide, what triggers genocide to happen in a society. And there's this founder, I can't remember his name right now. I'm so bad with names. I'm so horrible with it. But really incredible guy. 8 Stages of Genocide is, you can look up his work. It's really interesting. Just look up 8 Stages of Genocide. You'll find it. And he talks about how you can, um, you know, cause, put a halt to it, or you can, say, hey, let's take a step back. Let's not actually get to that point. Once the dam breaks, it just goes its own route. It's really difficult to bring it all back in, but before it gets to that point, um, finding common ground, finding, what brings us together, whether it's the left or the right, what kind of commonality can we bring together in these moments? One of them being like, we all live in this country, like we are all American. We are all, and yes, some people want to disown that and they hate that, but it's like, what is that common ground? How can we have these conversations? And I think that you do a really great job of doing that on your platform, and allowing people to educate themselves on what people are saying in the streets and the movers and shakers and things like that. So props to you with that. I really like your interview style. It's really great.
Thank you. One thing
Yeah.
I've seen as far as genocide patterns is almost every place that I'm aware of that's had these great atrocities, like think of like Rwanda or Nazi Germany, and even in Cuba, um, you see people start dehumanizing the other side. The Nazis referred to the Jews as kind of an infestation, and they had that whole thing about the Zyklon B where they were delousing all the buildings, and they were so focused on everything being pure, and they labeled the Jews as similar to like a rodent or an insect. In Rwanda, I think they called them cockroaches. Um,
Yes.
and so one thing I've been trying to push is for, a lot of people in Black Lives Matter and Antifa are hurting people and doing really bad things and disrupting society. And people are starting to more and more dehumanize them when they talk about them. And like, yes, I am of the belief that they're a bad group of people that are hurting people and doing bad things in general. But they're still humans. And we have to remember that, so we don't go down that route to where we just got these two camps that don't even see each other as human anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's maybe like stage 3 or 4 in the stage, it's like, that is a very, it's easy to identify, once you start to objectify or dehumanize another group, it allows violence to occur, right? So we see that in punch a fascist in the face, you know,
Mhm.
or you know, that slogan. I mean, people wear it on t-shirts, you know, but what defines a fascist? Who is a fascist? Who has the ability to label a person as a fascist? You know, and that's when it gets into this very dangerous territory of, well, you could call anyone you don't like a fascist, you know, and you could ruin their lives. Essentially, you could get them fired from their job. You could, you know, there's so many risks that come up from that. So absolutely, like bringing about that humanization, I think people on either side need to get to that place mentally. I hope that we do, you know, of just whether it's the Trump supporter or the Black Lives Matter, like we are all human and we need to respect each other off of that basis, you know, like that's a fundamental right. Everyone has a fundamental right to respect, to dignity, you know, to safety in the space that they exist in, you know. So very interesting stuff. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and having these conversations. And we, you know, I look forward to your work, and I'd love to share it with my platform as well. Um, the Villain Report is where you can find him on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all those good things. Do you have any final thoughts, any final words that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I hope we can continue to create dialogue though with opposing viewpoints, because um, we've seen what happens when we don't talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much and continue the great work, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely.